Bonjour à tous et à toutes.
Good afternoon, everybody.
J'attends que tout le monde soit en place. On va démarrer.
Just wait for everyone to sit down, and then I shall begin.
Bien. Alors, donc je suis Isabelle Keffer.
I'm Isabelle
Je m'occupe
Keffer.
des études
I'm in
consommateurs
charge
au
of
sens large
consumer
chez Nielsen. Et en
surveys
deux
at
mots, une
Nielsen.
société qui fait deux
It's a
choses
company that does
essentiellement en
two
France.
things basically in
Qui
France.
récupère toutes les ventes de tous les magasins
They
en France,
get
hyper, supermarchés,
all
distributeurs,
the
etc. Donc on a les
magazines
ventes jour
from
le jour. Donc c'est tout
all
ce
the
qui va être
sales, all the
fait.
figures of
Et par ailleurs,
sales
on a un
from
panel de
all these
consommateurs
supermarkets
de
in France.
14 000 personnes
And we've got
représentant tous les
14,000 people,
Français
a panel,
et
a
qui adressent
representative,
ce qu'ils vont
which
acheter
and they
en
say what
hyper,
they're going to be
super,
buying
comme en
in
magasin
hypermarkets,
bio, comme dans tous les
supermarkets,
produits, comme
organic
dans tous
shops,
les magasins
all shops.
spécialisés sur l'univers de la grande consommation. Donc quand je dis grande
In general
consommation,
consumption,
on appelle ça PGCFLS, donc produit de grande consommation,
so
frais libre service.
consumption
Donc
and
c'est tout ce qu'on trouve en gros dans un
free service,
supermarché,
everything you get in a
l'alimentation,
supermarket
les
basically.
frais, aussi tout ce
Fresh
qui est
products,
hygiène et tout ce qui est produits
hygiene,
d'entretien pour la maison.
and
Donc on fait des bilans tous les ans. Le
everything you
sujet
can get in the
qu'on a
shops if you like.
retenu, donc c'est Healthy
So,
Food, potentiel et
healthy
opportunités.
food, potentials and
Donc je vais
opportunities.
présenter donc en trois parties. D'abord, je vais vous planter le décor en
So,
vous expliquant ce qui a
what
marché ou pas marché
worked
cette
and
année
didn't
en termes
work
de
this year in
consommation,
terms of
avant de
consumption,
zoomer sur deux
before we zoom
grosses
in on
tendances
two big trends
du healthy food
of
qui
healthy
sont
food,
très représentées quand
which
on
are
regarde
very
dans
highly
les
represented when you
affiches que
look
nous allons. On voit
here.
quoi? À mon avis, la
What do you
moitié, voire
say?
deux tiers des produits sont bio.
2/3 of the products are
20% sont
organic,
végétaux
20%
et
are
puis
plant,
10% sont
and
locaux dans
10%
le
are
sens
local in inverted
authentique,
commas, authentic.
produits de PME. Et ça tombe très bien parce que c'est
And that's
exactement
very
ce
good
type de
because that's
produit qu'on
exactly
va
what we
voir
were playing
se
with
développer en France.
and what
Alors,
we see
première
developing in
chose,
France. Now, the first thing,
l'ensemble des produits de grande consommation en France
products in
sur une
France
dizaine d'années. Je
over
mets le retour.
10 years or so,
On a ici l'évolution en valeur de tout ce que les Français ont acheté au
everything
cours
that's
des
been
années.
bought
Ce qu'on
over the year.
s'aperçoit, c'est
And
qu'on a
what
une
we see
évolution qui
is
s'est
that
même
there's
fortement
a
ralentie.
movement which has
Puisque
slowed
déjà en
down a great
novembre,
deal.
on pensait
People
que
have only spent
1,5% de plus
1.5%
plutôt en
more
produits de grande consommation que l'année
than
précédente. Et donc on
2016.
s'inscrit vraiment en dessous
So
des
we're really
performances qu'on a
way
vues
below the
précédemment.
performance we had in previous years.
Ça, c'est le chiffre d'affaires.
So that's
La même
turnover.
chose en volume.
The same
Donc le
thing in
nombre de
volume, the
produits que les
number of
Français ont
products
achetés.
that
Là, on
people
se
have
rend
been
compte
buying.
qu'on n'a pas d'évolution.
There you see
Ça
there
veut
is
dire
no
que le
movement, it's
gâteau, il ne
stagnant.
grossit
The
pas en
cake isn't
France
growing
sur
in
les produits de
France.
grande consommation. Autrement dit, quand
In other
quelqu'un
words,
progresse du
when
fait au
somebody
détriment d'un autre,
when
du gâteau
somebody
au détriment
progresses,
de
that
l'autre,
means somebody else loses
donc on
out.
a une consommation qui est
So
relativement
consumption is
stable.
relatively stable.
Pourquoi en fait ce
Now,
phénomène?
why is there this phenomenon?
Il y a des gens qui ne veulent pas faire
There are people
autrement.
who can't do
On a ici une
otherwise.
répartition
We've tried to
des
look at
Français
the
entre
breakdown of
différents
people between
cycles de vie, si je puis dire.
different
À gauche,
life
vous avez
cycles.
le
On the
nombre de
left, the
personnes qui
number of
disposent des
people in the
moyens, et à
household,
droite, c'est le pouvoir
and on the
d'achat.
right is
Et on
purchasing
se rend
power.
compte de quoi? Que ce sont les gens modestes, en fait, qui ont
And it's the
dépensé
poorer
moins d'une
people who
année sur
spent
l'autre,
less
forcément
from
avec
one
gestion du
year
budget
to the
qui est
next. There's
différée.
budget
Et ça se
management, which
retrouve
is
au sein des familles.
more,
Pourquoi?
and
Parce
it's the
qu'on
same within
baisse
families. So there's
leurs
been a
dépenses de
drop
grande consommation.
in spending.
Ça peut être pour s'acheter d'autres
So it can
produits,
be
ça
to
peut
buy other
être pour
products, it can be
répondre
buy
à
for
d'autres secteurs. Mais
telephone, all sorts of
globalement,
things.
on
But
sent quand même
globally,
qu'il y a une
overall,
pression du
there
pouvoir
is
d'achat qui
pressure on
existe toujours en
purchasing power.
France sur
It
la
exists in
consommation de
France
produits
on
courants.
product consumption.
Alors là, il y a un peu beaucoup de choses,
So
mais vous allez peut-être trouver votre
there
bonheur
you've
si vous êtes intéressé
maybe,
à l'un ou
if
l'autre
you're
des
interested
sujets.
in one of these
Donc on
subjects,
a regardé ce que les
there you can
Français avaient
see
acheté
what
en plus
people
d'une année
bought
sur
more
l'autre.
from one year to the
Et on a
next.
essayé de ranger
And we've
tous
tried
ces
to
produits
sort all
par
these
grands
products
thèmes.
by different
Alors déjà,
themes.
on peut peut-être
Now,
regarder le
maybe
thème
you can
santé,
see health,
12%. Donc
12%,
déjà, puisque le sujet c'est quand même
because the
healthy,
subject is
on ne peut pas
healthy.
dire que
You can't say
80% des
that
dépenses supplémentaires
80%
des
of extra
Français
spending
l'année
of French
dernière
people last
se
year
sont dirigés vers des
was
produits sains.
on
C'est en
healthy
l'occurrence pas le cas, il
products.
y en a quand même. Et
There are
encore, si je
some, but
continue sur la
if
santé,
we
à
continue on
l'intérieur de
health,
ce pôle, on
within
a par
this,
exemple les œufs
you've
de
got
mer, 5%, ça veut dire quoi?
free-range
Sur
eggs,
100 euros
5%. So out of
supplémentaires que
100
les
euros
Français ont
extra that
dépensés
people
entre les
spent,
deux années, 5 euros sont allés
5
sur
euros
des œufs de
went
plein air,
towards
donc, par
free-range
rapport à
eggs,
l'année d'avant.
as opposed to
Donc les
the
œufs de plein air,
previous
c'est
year.
aussi
So
comment dire,
this is
distribution qui a beaucoup poussé, donc surtout
there's
les
been a big
œufs d'or
drive
qu'on
on this.
achète
So
aujourd'hui.
if
Deux
there's
grosses
no
tendances, c'est quoi? Alors,
battery
je
hens,
passe un peu les
this is
boissons,
all there is. So now
parce que les
drinks.
boissons sont, comment dire,
Drinks
expliquées par un phénomène saisonnier. La
can be
même période
explained
l'année 2017 a
seasonally.
été favorable aux boissons, donc
2017
à l'eau plate, aux boissons
was
sucrées,
very
etc.
favorable
Par
for
contre, la bière, ça fait plusieurs années
these
que la bière
drinks,
se
but
développe fortement en
beer has
France.
been
C'est vraiment
developing a great deal. Beer has
un développement
had
inhérent à la
this is
catégorie, ou à
something in
l'équilibre
the
peut-être, et
category.
surtout une question de praticité. D'ailleurs, la praticité et
So
le sans cuisine, vous voyez que
practicality,
c'est quand même
you
ce
can
que
see
les
there
Français recherchent
what
avant
people
tout,
are looking for above
puisqu'on
anything
va
else,
progresser,
because you see
notamment tout ce qui est sans cuisine
progress
a été bien
in
cuisiné, ça depuis
Ready meals, over 15 years, this has been the biggest movement, fresh, but as well, here you can see pre-packed salads, snacking, sandwiches, sushi, forms of consumption which are much more practical without there necessarily being the idea of health. On the practical side as well, there are two things which are interesting. Fresh meat, so it's free, so it's help yourself. So it's before people would queue up, but now it's the same thing for fish. It's more practical to buy, and they're snacking and aperitif. So that's the reality of what people have spent more last year as opposed to 2016. Now you can have trends within that as well. I'm going to talk about plants and so on, and organic. So something is important. Where does growth come from in consumption? Well, very often there are two driving forces. Innovation, on the one hand, I'm going to talk about innovation, which products were the most innovative or did the biggest turnover. And the other element is the supply. We realize that people follow the proposals that they see. If the offer improves on such and such a product, you can see that it's going to have an impact. So that explains the growth of products. Now, 2017 was not massive. 2.8% of consumption overall came from products launched in the year. So it's not more than 2016. I'm going to show you now the products, the biggest, not successes, but the biggest sales. After six months after their launch, all these products together, food, non-food. The biggest sale was Lotus nappies, 9 million euros turnover. Then you've got other things. The product is what? Well, you've got brownies, granola, you've got M&Ms, you've got milk, C'est moi le patron in the top 10. There's all sorts of hundreds of products that are launched from one year to the next. So here, not just healthy products. I'm going to zoom in straight away on food products in the table. You've got what? You've got brownies, you've got cakes, you've got frozen pizza. Two products maybe which are more tendency, intense, bon moment intense is jam, and Tropicana, which is in a dessert, fruit-based dessert. But apart from that, there's still a demand for pleasure food, and we're not 100% in healthy. Before we move on to organics, something that's very interesting here in the salon, in this trade fair, is where growth comes from in terms of groups. They're not the distributor brands, which are right at the bottom, which is stable. The own brand, even if it's SMEs that produce for them. The big groups had turnover that only improved by 1%. So it's SMEs, it's very small companies and so on, that progressed the best over 2017. So all this contributed to 2/3 of growth in France. And it's not the first year that this has happened. In France, there's a trend where it's the SMEs which are sort of much more chosen by consumers than international products or products from big groups, and even for own brand. As well, these small companies, these small businesses, we've got other information. We look at who buys the products compared to big groups and distributor brand. Two notions on the left. In blue, you've got seniors. We've seen that half of SME sales are towards seniors, whereas the big groups or distributor brands, there's 40-50%. And 47% of turnover is bought by people with more money. So people who've got purchasing power. That's interesting when you're thinking about the pricing and the cost. People talk a lot about the millennials. This is the thing that everybody's been talking about now. Seniors, there's more and more seniors, so there'll be even more tomorrow. It's the market for tomorrow is not the millennials, but the senior. So just to, we looked at what was happening in terms of development last year. There, what's this mean? So Pingo, they make chicken baked products. They moved up 42% over 2 years. Mixed Buffet plus 31%. Cité Marine 23%. Who's in this hit parade? You've got practical, ready-made mixed buffet salads. You've got sushi, Pierre Martinet, catering, Rana, this is pasta, is ready pasta, fresh pasta. And then people who are more in Léa Nature. So Jardin Bio is bioéthique in hygiene and beauty. There's Royal, W Royal, that's Biok, that's organic, and Laboratoire Vitarmonil, who are in health. So it's these small companies, practical, ready meals that are advancing, or more health ways. You've got Nature Vitarmonil and so on. So each time, I mean, every time we see companies that are moving forward a lot, and 80% of this growth comes from the fact that they've really driven their special sales. And you can see that the big majority of their growth is natural, or is not due to these special offers. And the last information concerns SMEs who've done studies on on these models by category to see which products need to be put on shelves to make sure that the category can develop more. And we took an example for beer, for instance. The model recommends to drive small groups and not the big groups. So a distributor is going to need 10 references more in beer from small brands, and they're going to have to cut off 6 references from big groups. And this is something you see in all categories. There's a big demand for SMEs. You can see it's developing in consumption, and it's in the interests of the distributors, because with more SMEs, they're going to develop their turnover. So SMEs is a big vector for growth over the past 3 years. Now, to set the decor again, it's the end of the hypermarket. Today, the hypermarket is still 42% of sales in France. Supermarkets 34%. Drive internet is increasing as well, but we won't see those arriving ahead of the hypermarkets and supermarkets. And so we're still in distribution that we've always seen, even if there is a drive or in proximity stores rising. Supermarkets, the hard discount we used to call them, they've got their own brand, they sell their own brand, Netto, Aldi, Lidl, this sort of shop, and they're not moving forward a great deal.
Alors ça c'était pour la partie GMS, donc hyper super, ça reste la grande majorité des achats des Français. Faut quand même pas oublier qu'il se passe des choses ailleurs.
So things are happening elsewhere.
De façon assez forte dans d'autres types de circuits. Par exemple, les magasins spécialistes bio.
So organic specialists, which is going to segue me into a bit on organics. So up 16% last year. In specialist fresh, like Grand Frais, for instance, up 7%. Frozen foods +1, special pet food +5. And Action, which is for special sales. So it's around a kernel, which is basically hyper and supermarkets. So I'm going to talk about organic now, because it's really the axis that's pushed up a lot, as we've seen here at the salon. First of all, in the shops. Now, why is it moving so much? Well, the number of shops has increased considerably, particularly over the past 2 years. 2010 to 2018, from 836 shops to 1,526. And so the park has grown considerably over the past 2 years. Do you know who's the leader in turnover and in the number of shops? It's 5 months old, these figures, so there's 528 now, I think, Biocoops. It's the biggest brand, plus 17% in the number of openings of shops. Then La Vie Claire. And then all these are advancing. Naturalia. If you're in Paris, there's more Bio C'est Bon, but it's not the most frequent one elsewhere, like Naturalia. So the park is advancing, and it's a source as well, because it's their nature to use organics, of course. The consequence of all of this is that 5 years ago, it was very, very Parisian. When you look at the map, you realize that there's shops everywhere, the map on the left. And the number of people who go and shop in organic shops goes up regularly. Last year, there was 22.5% of people who did at least one purchase, 1 person out of 5. 100% as well were in hyper supermarket as well, mass retailers. So this figure of 22%, when you look at it by region, in the Paris region, for instance, 28% of people who go to organic shops, whereas in the Northeast, it's only 14%. Quite simply because the number of shops is much lower in the Northeastern region. So the more shops there are, the more people are going to go and buy in that type of shop. That's the specialized organic shops. But what's happening a lot as well is what's happening in mass retailers. Today, or last year, it came up to 3.6 billion. So its market share, we'll see just afterwards, 3.4%. It's not the biggest share, but in growth, it's massive, plus 21% growth from one year on the other. 25.5 million, 93% of people, that's everybody, bought once an organic product. You know, people buy lots of things, but everybody virtually bought one organic product and came 1.5 times a month. So that's the frequency. So it's still lower than standard products because people generally do 8 times, go shopping 8 times a week, so 1.5 times a month. So a figure from the Agence Bio, the organic organization. So for all shops, everybody, it's 8 billion is the total market, which gives different size to the potential with a rapport de force. And leading sellers are the mass retailers. Now, big interpenetration between organic shops and mass retailers. They buy as well. So it's not just cut off. There's not just people that go to just organic shops and others just mass retailers. So there's complementarity of the offering. I'm going to buy some in specialized shop and others in a standard shop. So I buy 58% more than the average person. So I'm a big buyer of organic products. And there I buy 30 times a year when I go. And so we've got two worlds which communicate. People go and buy organic products in specialist shops, and particularly those that go to specialist shops as well. So that was something that was very new for last year. Historically, organic was bought by people who were senior. What can we see here? Well, the weight of organic purchases in everything that people are buying in France, 3.3% of everything that's bought in France. It's up by 2.8 to 3.3%. And there, you can see where it's higher. There's a 3.8 to 3.839. Where do we see it? So, under 35, no children, 35-49 without children, and families with young children. So my oldest child is 5, maximum 10. So you've got that with the different primaire, secondaire, tertiaire, etc. So people buy it to preserve the health of their children, which wasn't the case a few years ago. So there's, what can you call it, there's a acceptance now of organic products for this type of household, and that's very important for the future. Now, the 3.6 billion is up very much from one year to the next. Sales are up 21% last year. It was already 19% the year before. So you can see there's this acceleration of growth in 2016, 2017. The essential factor which explains this growth in sales is the supply. The number of organic products, which itself is up 22%. In other words, there's total parallel between the more products I have, the more I'm going to sell in organic products. And this is not going to be saturated soon. So we're going to be able to put them into shops, and sales are going to increase at a good rate to double digit this year. If I do forecasts, and we'll see there's going to be +8, +6, but there's still a big pocket of growth there for organic products. Now, there's a lot of figures there, but if you're interested in knowing which category organics are the strongest, it's the one on the left. Organics represent 59% of sales of everything that is Bjorg and other people like that, and so dietetics. The second is vegetable salads in cans, and then you've got plants, you've got herbal teas and so on. Then we've only got 20 or so categories, but there are 250, and in food 180. But there's a great deal of potential for organics. Everything that's not there, for instance, which are under 9%. And on the right says what? Well, out of 100 euros in organics, 10% is in health foods. That's what comes out most today. 10%, and then it's eggs, 8%, milk, fruit juice, yogurts, and so on. Now, what's striking is that with these 12 categories, you've got half of the organic turnover. 12 categories in relation to 180, a massive potential for organics over all the other categories. So we're very concentrated, very focused on a limited number of categories, which are strong in organic. Now, there's something that's interesting. It's not just anybody selling. Market share in organics is much higher than market share of own brands in standard. What does this mean? Well, in black at the bottom, you've got market share of own brand in France. And when you look at organics, there's 46%, almost half of organics today, which are with the own brand. You can say, of course, if there's twice as many references of distributor brands in organic than normal, no, but there's more proportionally in own brand organic than general, but it's not the same level as the sales that you see here at 46%. So there's a bit more proportionally of own brand in the organic products than standard products, but at least the performance is very good. Now, we all think about the price when you know that the average is 125% more. If I'm looking at an own brand in relation to other brand in organic, I'm going to get a sort of a balance out. Whereas if I buy a known brand, I'm going to pay for the brand and for the organic, so it's going to have a big difference. So very often these are made by SMEs, and there's over-representation of everything that's there to the detriment of the big groups. And so own brand is there. 80% of people who buy, they buy distributor brand, own brand, and non-own brand. Now the major players, we saw some earlier on. There you've got the turnover. In organic, the one that sells the most in France is Royal Vessenen, more than 200 million. So Biog, the brand. Then Léa Nature, Jardin Bio in food, Bioéthique. There's Esso Bio in hygiene and beauty. Then occasionally you get people coming in. For instance, Lactalis. But Lactalis, out of 100 million in organic, it's nothing. It's just 6% of everything they sell in France, so they're not specialized in organic products. You've got Otsuka. I can't remember the name of the brand. I should know it, but I've forgotten. I'm sure that you do. Trebala with Vrai, Britvic. And then there's a lot of SMEs there. They're the biggest, to the detriment of the big multinationals or the big groups. But they're coming. What's flagrant, what's striking about the end of 2017 and now is that all the big manufacturers are coming along with organic products now. It's just an extract. Lactel had already done that. Pressade Bio, that works really well. There's salmon, there's Puget. That's just an example, but it's a priority of all the big groups now in terms of strategy to surf on this organic wave. And so we looked last year to see which products were the best, which worked the best, were the most sold. In first place, there's Côte d'Or Bio, chocolate, 2 million. It's not massive as a launch for everything that you get in mass consumption. You've got Blini, you've got herbal teas, so big groups. You've got a mix salade from Mix Buffet, Rochefontaine. So there, what's interesting here is that after 6 months of sales, so you're doubling to have annual turnover, this gives you the potential turnover of an organic range. If you look at 4 million for the chocolate, 4 to 5 million, this is what you can estimate as turnover for a product that works well. So it gives you an idea of when you want to do a launch. And there we are. I said that there's lots of others coming along. Liebig, Carte Noire, Charal, Fleury Michon for its ham. They've got lots of things. After health now, they've got organic and chicken. La Laitière is Lactalis Nestlé. Same, even children's, even baby formula. So you can see there's references from big groups coming along that can compete with the SMEs and which are going to develop the organic market. I didn't put the information down here, but for these companies, it's really interesting for them to do organics. We've done lots of studies showing that for these launches, there's only 30% roughly of turnover that's cannibalized on standard range. In other words, if you look at Guigot's Bio organic, so there's only 30% of substitution. All the rest is going to come additional to the brand, and that's true for loads of examples. So that's apart from profitability of these products, but they can extend their territory and they can go and find new consumers. So tomorrow there's going to be big growth for 3 main reasons. In the middle, the offer, the supply. I showed you half of the sales were over 12 categories, but there's 200 in France, so there's room for organics. What we've got on the right is the price. The average price is 125. So there's going to be a differentiation. People are going to buy organic because they can do, and others can't. So the massification of production is going to, this was said by the previous speakers, this should cause greater accessibility in terms of price. And so we're going to have a development of organics which will be facilitated by a drop in prices.
In bio-organic products, only 13% is through promotions. That's very far from the 22% average in products generally in France. So this is half of that, right? Meaning it's not that profitable. That's there on the left. says we need to think about the place here, and SDMP meaning the hard discounters, Lidl, and those. So they have their market share, but lower than expected. So 2-3 years in figures, and then we'll have bigger markets that will stabilize. So this is a summary here of what we've seen. This explains the growth of organic products. It's about the offer, about supply. There are more and more products. So that means they're more purchased, right? Another important point is the family aspect. Today, organic food has been accepted by families with young children. It's a bit scary because they're buying organic products to sort of protect their children's health. But since these are families that were aged, children won't grow up. So this is establishing the pillar of consumption of organic in the future. So it's not just organic, it's plant-based. So volume-wise, let's look at this. When you ask people what they want in their stores or what kind of products, well, they say 54% say 100% natural. Now, that's where the real demand is. Organic is just a type of a solution for people for their quest for natural products. But ultimately, that's what it is. They want natural products. Organic is lower down on that list. Everything else, color-free, GMO-free, OGM-free, no, GMO-free, sorry. It's just don't poison me, basically. So this is where you need to find the positioning for driving growth. Now you can see how this is expressed. Natural products. Last year we saw fruit purchases, raw fruit, bananas, oranges, whatever, vegetables, that we hadn't seen for a while. People were buying increasingly processed products and fewer raw products. So we're seeing a growth. We saw growth in fruits and veggies amongst families. And the message here is that the supply is determining in terms of sales. We have stores that have made lots of improvements to make their produce sections much nicer. It's theatralization, staging. That means people are more interested in going into these sections and buying more fruits and vegetables. Mostly families, here we are. Where we saw the most increase were these families with children. So there's awareness. I heard 5 fruits and vegetables a day. Maybe that's finally making its way into the mainstream to people's minds, but families bought 3.8% more fruits and veggies. So more fruits, more fresh vegetables. What's interesting, if you look at the types of fruits that grew the most, we're realizing that these are dry fruits, dried fruits. So we're seeing an increase of 11%. That's a quarter of the additional spend, the 23% over the past 2 years. And that's almonds and nuts. Almonds 53%, nuts 31%. We know that dried fruits are richer in vegetable protein than meat. So you see with these figures here. Now here you have in the middle the grams of protein per each of these types of dried fruits, so 20 grams per almonds. And you can see their increase in sales, plus 13, 14, 11% for almonds, nuts, and pistachios. So these are rich in vegetable protein, so compelling people to buy and eat less meat. I also realized that peanut butter has a lot of protein, but there are other drawbacks to that, right? And quinoa, that's growing as well, but small figures at this stage. So now, as regards these trends, let's not forget that a French person's budget, when we look at where they're going to spend their money, it's going to be meat, still, 580 euros. yogurts, and then fruits and vegetables are much lower. So they're totally not becoming all vegetable, all organic. We have trends, but animal-based products are still the essential part of French people's diets.
Et on est encore loin d'être végétarienne, mais ça va être le sujet, je crois, de l'intervention suivante.
I believe we have vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, that coming up in the presentation just after mine. So you can see here, vegan 2%, vegetarian 4%, flexitarian 4%. Those are people who've decided to eat less meat. So altogether 16%, 16% less meat, but we're moving more towards vegetables and plants. Now, veggie products. Now, these are plant-based meat replacements. So it looks like a steak, but it's plant-based. 20% of the French people buy these, and that's substantial for the French. Before you just had 5 years ago, just had specialist brands. So 56 million in revenues for those products, fresh products. And 8 SKUs per store, generally speaking, on average. So who are we talking about? What are we talking about? These were specialized producers in the past, Bjork, like cereal bars and granola bars and that kind of thing. We've seen more general retailers coming in here. If we take Fleury Mignon and their sales in millions there. So 2 messages here. One, growth of the specialized producers continues, and the more conventional brands, such as historic retailers, Herta, Fleury Michon, these folks are coming in here and adding revenues, adding sales to this group. So the market is growing with these new producers, new players. So that's plant-based. We also have new launches of new brands. We're going to see substantial growth there this year and the upcoming years. So it's a big market growing. And all the proposals I've seen here, all the offer I've seen here is going to continue. So one point that's interesting here, in the past, ultra-fresh yogurt, we saw soya yogurts growing at 16% in 2015. In 2016, 15%, and last year, boom, it just dropped off. So what's taken place there? We have other offers in this section. You have goat's milk and ewe milk, sheep milk, that people consider as healthy as the soya yogurt. So you can see there the figures. Goat plus 20%, plant-based. Slowed down a bit because, again, the offer, the supply, there are many more goat and sheep products supplanting the soya. So it's the alternative product, organic goat. This is and sheep. It's about 10% of the whole market. It's not just a passing fad. So another market, milk. We have plant-based milk, so almond and hazelnut, all of those. Looking at the overall cow's milk market. You can see the green figures at the bottom. It's 7.5% of the market value-wise. So you can see there's a bit of a battle there. But it's no longer just a microscopic market compared to cow's milk, which is eroding in terms of sales every year. Lots of little markets where we see people looking for healthier products. So 6% growth of green tea. You know that's better for, it's supposed to be better for health. Herbs or herbs, frozen herbs, plus 5%. Quinoa, we talked about that. Bulgur, oils, we're seeing sesame oil and walnut oil growing over sunflower oil. Then we have some less processed. We want less processed products. So we got brown rice, whole grain rice, coffee grains, not ground already. You want to ground your own coffee, grind your own coffee. Seems more natural. And dry vegetables and legumes, looking for vegetable or plant-based protein that you explains the growth here. And then lastly, with this section here, there are two drivers behind growth. It's the offer, the proposition, and innovation. Innovation is a good driver for growth for SMEs. SMEs are generating 2/3 of the growth in the market there anyway. Organic has a lot of potential in many categories because it's present. There's a lot of room for growth there. Now, behind the idea of wanting to eat healthier, we're seeing more fruits and vegetables and plant-based, be they meat substitutes or whatever. Those are on the upswing. And I would say two things here. One, again, organic is just one way of people's expression of trying to eat healthier. It's not a single answer. It's not a single solution. We have products have fewer ingredients, maybe. They're transparent. Nothing to hide, either in the process or the final product. Those products, as long as people communicate on them properly, they can be a good solution for what French people are looking for, as long as they're not incredibly more expensive. And then another point is France is not becoming 100% vegetarian or 100% healthy eater. You saw in the hit parade there of the innovations, we had brownies. So enjoyment is there. Pleasure is important when eating. And when you're eating a Mars bar, you don't really care what's in it. You know, you're going to eat it, you know it's not good, but you're going to eat it anyway. You can't always be thinking, oh, I have to eat 100% healthy with every single product. And one last thing I wanted you to keep in mind. Wait, I forgot. Okay, here it is. It's not today's topic, but buoyant trends are local products, because anything local, made in France by an SME, made next to where you live, is better than other products, because in local, people confuse it, but local equals good. But anyway, that's a growth driver, so that's for you to see. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to entertain any questions if you have any.
Eh bien, merci. Merci.
Thank you all.